Her name appeared twice in the draft she'd left open on her laptop. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the coffee going cold on the desk between us. Not the November rain tapping against the office window. Not the fact that I had absolutely no reason to be reading what was on her screen. Just my name. Twice. In a sentence I was never supposed to see. Her name was Fern. And before you assume anything about what kind of story this is, let me be clear. I spent a long time assuming the same things you are right now, and getting it completely wrong. We'd worked at the same mid-size architecture firm in downtown Vancouver for 4 years. I was in structural, she was in design. Different enough that we had no real reason to be in each other's orbit, close enough that we kept ending up there anyway. It started with the coffee machine on the 6th floor. Both of us had figured out, independently, that the one on 6 was better than the one on 3, quieter, closer to the window that faced the mountains on clear days. We ran into each other enough times that eventually not saying hello would have been stranger than saying it. That became lunch, sometimes. The food court downstairs, splitting the corner table because neither of us liked sitting with our backs to the room. Then it became the habit of texting when one of us was heading to 6, in case the other wanted anything. Then it became the kind of friendship where she'd send me a photo of a terrible ceiling fan she'd spotted at a house showing, and I'd respond with a voice memo, laughing about load-bearing walls that clearly were not load-bearing. The kind of thing that's hard to explain to anyone who isn't inside it. People noticed, of course. Firms are small ecosystems. The project manager on the Burnaby condo development made a comment once about how Fern and I were attached at the hip, which I deflected with something about collaborative cross-department efficiency, which made him laugh and me feel slightly ridiculous. Our team lead mentioned once, in passing, that we were good for each other's morale. Fern's closest colleague, a woman named Dominique who had the particular gift of saying exactly what she meant without any softening, told me plainly one afternoon. "You know she lights up when you come into a room, right?" I said something about how Fern was just a naturally expressive person. Dominique looked at me the way you look at someone who has just confidently said something incorrect. I chose not to examine that too closely. I had a knack for not examining things too closely when it came to Fern. The honest version of this, the one I'd been carefully not writing anywhere, was that she had been the clearest part of my life for about 3 years. Not the loudest, not the most dramatic. Just the part that made the rest of it make more sense. I knew she put oat milk in her coffee, but switched to black when she was stressed, which meant I could usually tell how her morning had gone within 30 seconds of seeing her. I knew that she hated when people said circling back in emails, but that she used it herself when she was tired and then felt guilty about it for the rest of the day. I knew that her laugh, the real one, not the polite version she used in client presentations, started in her shoulders before it reached her face. I knew all of that, and I'd filed it very neatly under friendship and kept moving. Because the alternative was terrifying. She was one of the best things in my life, and I'd seen what happened when you turned something good into a question and got the wrong answer. I wasn't willing to find out what the 6th floor coffee machine felt like without her there. So I got good at almost. Almost asking, almost saying, almost letting it be what it was. I'd been doing it for long enough that it started to feel like a personality trait. The November in question was a bad one for the firm. We'd lost a bid on a significant mixed-use development in Richmond, and the post-mortem had been long, tense, and not entirely productive. Fern had been leading the design portion of the proposal, and I knew how much she'd put into it. She didn't say much about the loss out loud. She got quieter instead, which was its own kind of loud if you knew her. That Friday evening, I stayed late to finish some load calculations I'd been avoiding all week. The office had mostly emptied out. I was in the open workspace on the 4th floor, headphones around my neck, the kind of tired where everything felt slightly underwater, when I noticed the light on at Fern's workstation across the room. She was still there, head bent over her sketchbook, pen moving in that focused way she had when she was working through something that wasn't quite clicking yet. I went over with 2 coffees from the machine on 6, which by that hour was the only responsible thing to do, and set one beside her without interrupting. She looked up. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. I also didn't have to stay until 8 on a Friday, but here we both are." She smiled, the shoulder kind. Then she looked at the sketchbook and back at me. I keep trying to figure out what we did wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. The budget numbers made it impossible. Everyone knows that. I know. She tapped the pen against the page. Doesn't make it feel better. We talked for a while about the bid, then about other things, then about nothing in particular, the way you do when you're both tired, and the building is quiet and the rain is doing that soft, persistent thing it does in November in Vancouver. At some point, she pulled her laptop over to check something she'd referenced in the sketchbook. And then her phone rang. She picked it up and glanced at the screen. It's my landlord. I have to take this. He's been trying to reach me about the heat in my building all week. She stood, already stepping toward the hallway. Give me 5 minutes. Take your time. She was gone. I leaned back in the chair across from hers, half watching the rain against the window, half looking at nothing. I wasn't looking at her laptop. I genuinely wasn't. I was looking past it at the reflection of the office lights in the glass, and then the screen, which had gone to the document she'd opened, caught my eye. It was a draft, a personal one, not a work file. The kind of thing that was open because she'd probably been writing in it on her lunch break and forgotten to close the tab. The cursor was blinking in the middle of a paragraph. I could see it from where I was sitting without leaning in at all, which is the thing I keep coming back to, the fact that I didn't go looking, but I could read it. And I did, for about 3 seconds before my brain caught up with what my eyes were doing. The part I haven't been able to say out loud, which is that being around Liam feels like being allowed to exhale. Like I've been holding something in for so long that I don't even notice it anymore. And then he walks in and I notice. And I've been telling myself that's just friendship, that's just comfort, that's just the way it is with someone who actually knows you. But I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I wrote his name here twice because I couldn't figure out how to write the sentence without it. I stopped reading. I sat very still in the chair and looked at the rain and tried to do something useful with my brain, which was not cooperating. She had written my name twice because she couldn't figure out how to write the sentence without it. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with any of it. The thing that landed hardest wasn't even the content of what she'd written. It was the phrase, "I've been telling myself." Because that was the thing you said when you'd been trying to believe something that wasn't quite holding anymore. I knew something about that. Her voice came from the hallway, still on the phone, something about a maintenance window and a work order number. I had about 90 seconds, maybe less. I looked at the screen once more. Just long enough to register that the document was titled with nothing, no name, no date, just a blinking cursor in a file that hadn't been saved yet. Then I looked away, and I stayed looking away. When she came back, I was watching the rain. "Sorry," she said, dropping back into her chair. "He needed the unit number 3 times. 3 times, Liam? Sounds about right." She reached forward to close the laptop without looking at the screen, which told me something. The quick, practiced motion of someone who was used to making sure nobody saw what was open. I didn't say anything. We finished our coffees. We talked about the weekend, about her plans to visit her parents in Kelowna, about the fact that my landlord had also been a persistent presence in my recent life due to a parking situation I won't bore you with. We talked about the project that was coming up in the new year, a community center in Coquitlam that both departments would be involved in. The whole time, the sentence sat in my chest, like something that hadn't decided what it was yet. I drove home through the rain and sat in my apartment on the couch for a long time without turning on any lights. My cat, a very elderly and opinionated tabby, named after a hockey player my grandmother had loved, came and sat on my feet, which he only did when he thought I was being stupid about something. The thing I couldn't get past was this. The sentence she'd written matched something I hadn't let myself write. Not in a document, not anywhere, but it had been there. It had been there for a long time, somewhere behind everything I filed under friendship and kept moving past. The part about exhaling, that was the part I kept coming back to. Because that was exactly what it felt like. Walking into a room where Fern was in it, and something in my chest going quiet. Not a dramatic thing, just that, just quiet. In the way that only happens when you're somewhere you're allowed to be. I had attributed this, over the years, to the comfort of knowing someone well. I'd told myself it was just what good friendship felt like, and maybe I'd even believed it, for a while. But sitting there in the dark with a cat on my feet and rain on the window, I couldn't make that explanation fit anymore. I didn't sleep well. Saturday, she was in Kelowna. I knew this because she sent me a photo of the drive, the mountains going orange and gray in the early morning light, through her passenger window, with no caption, which was her way of saying something was beautiful without making a thing of it. I sent back a thumbs up, which was my way of saying I saw it and agreed, which was also our language. I spent Saturday doing the things I usually did on Saturdays: grocery run at the No Frills on Hastings, laundry, a long run along the seawall that I used mostly for thinking. I thought about whether I was reading too much into what I'd seen. I thought about whether I should pretend I hadn't seen it. I thought about whether there was a version of this where I said nothing and things stayed the same and that was fine. I didn't find one. The version where things stayed the same wasn't terrible, exactly. It was just, once I admitted it to myself, not the whole truth. And I had a feeling that once you've seen the whole truth, the partial version starts to feel like something you're actively choosing, which is different from something that's just happening. Sunday, she came back from Kelowna. I knew this because she texted at some point in the afternoon to say the drive back was wet and she'd made it home, which was her checking in, without framing it as checking in. I said I was glad. She said she'd see me Monday. Monday, I was at my desk before 9. She came in just after and stopped at the coffee machine on 3, which meant her morning had been fine. I watched her cross the floor toward her desk from the corner of my eye, the way you do when you're trying not to be obvious about watching someone. Dominique caught me doing it. She said nothing, just looked at me for 1 second, with an expression that suggested she had long since arrived at a conclusion I was only just approaching. I spent Monday being normal. I was good at being normal. I'd had years of practice. Tuesday, I went up to 6 at 1:45, her usual lunchtime, and got 2 coffees. I brought them over to her desk and sat down across from her and said, "Can I say something badly and still get credit for meaning it?" Fern looked up. She had her pen in her hand, the good one she kept in the inside pocket of her jacket, which meant she'd been working on something she actually cared about. She said, "That depends on how badly, fairly badly." She put the pen down. She looked at me with the expression she used when she was paying attention. Not the polite version, the real version, which was very still and direct and slightly terrifying. "Okay." I put her coffee in front of her. I kept mine between my hands because I needed something to do with them. "I saw your screen on Friday," I said, by accident. I wasn't looking for it, but I saw it. The stillness on her face went a different kind of still. "How much?" Her voice was very even. 1 paragraph. She looked at the desk, then at me, then at the desk again. "Liam, I know. That was private. I know. I'm sorry. I'm not going to pretend I didn't read it, because I think pretending is exactly what we've been doing, and I'm tired of it." The word landed. I watched her register it. Tired, she'd written. She'd used the same word. She was quiet for long enough that I started to think I'd read the whole thing wrong, that the sentence meant something different than what I'd understood, that I was about to need to find a way to work in the same building as someone I'd just said something irretrievable to. Then she said, "You've been doing it too." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. "For a while." "How long is a while?" I thought about the coffee machine on 6, about the corner table in the food court, about the morning she'd found out the Richmond bid was rejected and had gone quiet in exactly the way I knew meant she was holding something together very carefully, and how I'd spent the whole afternoon finding small reasons to be nearby without making it obvious. Long enough that I don't have a clean answer to that. She exhaled. It was, and I recognized this without knowing why I recognized it, a very specific kind of exhale. The kind that comes after something you've been holding. "I felt so stupid writing that," she said. "I kept closing the document and then opening it again. I've started it 3 times in the last month. You said you wrote my name twice because you couldn't figure out how to write the sentence without it." She put her face in her hands for a moment. "You read that part." "That was the part I read." She lowered her hands. She was looking at me the way she looked at something she was trying to figure out whether to believe. "And you're here because I think the reason you couldn't write the sentence without it is the same reason I've been coming up to the 6th floor coffee machine for 2 years instead of just using the one on 3. Fern blinked. "The 6th floor one is actually better." The sixth floor one is marginally better, Fern. That's not why. She was quiet again, but it was a different quiet than before. Something in it had shifted. Outside, the November sky was doing the thing it does in Vancouver, low and white and patient. Someone across the floor was on a call about permit approvals. The coffee machine on 3 was audible from here if you paid attention. She said quietly, I wrote that paragraph because I was trying to talk myself out of it. I thought if I wrote it down, it would look smaller, more manageable. Did it work? No. A pause. Did reading it change anything for you? It made me stop being careful, I said. I think I'd been careful for a long time because you were the thing I was most afraid of getting wrong. And I realized on Friday that there isn't actually a version of careful that takes care of this. She looked at the coffee in front of her, then at me. Her shoulders did the thing they did right before the real laugh, loosened slightly, though this wasn't a laughing moment. It was something adjacent to it, something like relief wearing a slightly different expression. I cannot believe a draft document I forgot to close did this, she said. In fairness, your landlord also contributed. She laughed at that, a short one, surprised. Then she shook her head. I've thought about saying something to you, about 100 times. I always talked myself out of it. What stopped you? She looked at me with something very direct. Same thing that stopped you, I think. Yeah, that tracked. I leaned forward slightly, enough that the shift was clear. I don't want to keep being careful about this. I think I've been careful long enough that it's started to feel like a choice I'm actively making, and I don't want to keep making it. Liam, she said, my name, the way you say something you've been saying quietly to yourself and aren't used to saying out loud. I mean it. She held my gaze for a moment. Then she reached forward and picked up her coffee with both hands, the way she did when she was thinking. I waited. I'd gotten good at reading her pauses, and this one felt like the kind you didn't interrupt. The project in Coquitlam, she said finally. That's 6 months, at minimum. Cross-department collaboration. If this, she paused, gestured slightly between us, goes badly, that's going to be a very long 6 months. I know. You know, and you're still sitting here. I know, and I'm still sitting here. She looked at me for another moment. Something in her face settled, the particular way that happens when someone stops running a calculation and just decides. Okay, she said. I didn't make her say more than that. Okay was a complete sentence. We stayed at her desk for another 20 minutes, talking about nothing in particular, which is how we'd always been best at being together. At some point, her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, then back at me, with an expression I recognized because I'd been cataloging her expressions for 4 years without meaning to. That one was new. Or rather, it was one I recognized, but had never been able to name correctly until now. The weeks after that were unremarkable in all the ways that matter. The community center project started in earnest in January. We were in a lot of the same rooms, which was different now in a way that was mostly quiet and occasionally made Dominique, who noticed everything, look satisfied in a way she never bothered to hide. Fern still texted me photos of bad ceiling fans. I still sent voice memos about structural choices that offended me professionally. The 6th floor coffee machine remained our default, though the reason for it was no longer something either of us was pretending about. One afternoon in February, she showed me the document on her laptop, the one I'd seen by accident in November. She'd finished it. It was longer now, and it said things I had no business having read in a cold office on a Friday night, and several things I was glad I knew. Near the beginning, my name appeared twice in the sentence she'd said she couldn't write without it. She'd left it in. I didn't ask her why. Some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be true, and the two of us, I think, had been true for longer than either of us had known what to do with. We just needed a forgotten draft and a phone call from a persistent landlord to stop being careful about it. And if you were in my place, walking into that quiet office, seeing your name on a screen that wasn't meant for you, tell me what you would have done. Leave it in the comments. If this one landed, hit like and subscribe to Whispers someday, and I'll have another one for you soon.